Good afternoon, respected professor and my dear classmates. Today I would like to present my presentation of the social linguistic subject about language policy in Afghanistan, linguistic diversity and national unity. Uh, in this presentation I'm going to talk about language issues in Afghanistan, linguistic diversity, historical development, the official language problem, ascendance of the Persian and draft of a new constitution, ethnic and linguistic rivalry in the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, resurgence of Pashto under the Taliban, and language policy in the post-Taliban era. As you all know that Afghanistan is a heterogeneous nation. It means that Afghanistan is a nation of multiple languages. There are several languages spoken in Afghanistan, and there's no single language dominating all the country. Pashto and Dari are the two most dominant languages of all the other languages spoken in the country. And before 20th century, Dari was the most dominant and the only dominant language in the offices and legal places of Afghanistan. However, in 20th century, language policy changed for several reasons that we are going to discuss. First, linguistic diversity. Talking about linguistic diversity, let me tell you about Pashto. Pashto, which is also known as Pakhto, and Afghani by other tribes of Afghanistan, who are not Pashtuns. And this language is spoken mainly in Afghanistan and in eastern and western and northwestern Pakistan. This language has two main dialects that are spoken in Afghanistan. We have southern dialect and we have eastern dialect. Eastern dialect that is spoken in the east of Afghanistan, southern dialect spoken in the south of Afghanistan. Literature and literacy of Pashto language dates back to 7th century. However, even until the days of Ahmad Shah Baba's empire, Pashto was not a prominent language of the country in the offices, in the courts and businesses. In Afghanistan, 44% of the population are said to be Pashtuns. However, there are people who claim that around 60% of the population of the country is Pashtuns. Duranis and Ghilzais are the two major tribes of Pashtuns, yet there are other tribes like Romans and other tribes living in Pakistan and in Afghanistan who are neither Durrani or Ghilzai. Durrani has been said to be the main weakness of Pashtuns because it has divided Pashtuns. However, Pashtuns strengthened after Amir Abdurrahman Khan resettled Pashtuns from the south and east in the north of Afghanistan. There is the other major language spoken in Afghanistan, Dari, which is said to be another dialect of Farsi or Persian language, or sometimes they say that Farsi and Persian are the dialects of Dari language, whatever, they are closely related. It is mainly spoken by Tajiks of Afghanistan, however, by the other Afghans except Pashtuns and Tajiks. It is spoken as the lingua franca, which is the language that they use for their daily use when they are talking with the others or for their educational purposes and business purposes. Among the several dialects of the Dari, Kabuli dialect has been chosen as a standard one. And Dari has always been the language of administration, judiciary, and commerce in Afghanistan. In the past, competence in Dari was a condition of employment. If a person wanted to be employed, he or she should have learned Dari and should have been competent in Dari. Therefore, more than 50% of Afghans could speak and write Dari, while 30 to 35% of the population was able to speak Pashto because it was not a condition of employment in the past. Uzbek is another language that has Turkic origin Around 8% population of Afghanistan speak Uzbeki, and they have mainly come from Uzbekistan and from Central Asian countries centuries ago, who settled here in northern Afghanistan, and they had settled here until they were the majority of the population of the north, until Pashtuns were resettled by Amir Abdurrahman Khan in this area, after which Uzbeks became the minority. Historical development. Here I'm talking about two things, Pashto and Dari. First, Pashto, which is a more powerful language than Dari in Afghanistan, especially because most of the kings of Afghanistan in the history have been Pashtuns. Although they have been Pashtuns, Dari was still the prominent and prestigious language of the country, because these kings themselves spoke Dari in their courts, in their administrations, and all the official works were done by Dari. However, during Amir Sher Ali Khan's era, Pashto's status was elevated by choosing Pashto for military ranks. And since then, all the ranks in the country have, military ranks in our country have been in Pashto. Then Mahmud Tarzi's efforts by publishing Siraj al-Akhbar during Amir Abdullah Khan's reign helped Pashto, and Pashto became the national language. And after Amanullah Khan became the king of Afghanistan, freedom of press really helped Pashto, especially because Pashtuns needed to argue, to fight against the Durand line that had divided Pashtuns to the two sides of this borderline. So the press, the media, they all try to broadcast things in Pashto for this case. Then Pashtun Maraka, which was a Pashtun society in Kandahar, their efforts, and also the article in 1924 constitution during Amanullah Khan's era, which said that all the documents and things should be translated to Pashto. It elevated the status of Pashto. Then King Nader Shah's attempt to promote both Persian and Pashto literacy in the country helped elevate its status until there were publications in Pashto in Zahid Shah's reign, where Pashto became a more dominant language. Talking about Dari in the past had always been a more prestigious language because it was spoken in the courts, in administrations, it was language of commerce, it was language of education, medium of instruction, and it was language of economics. However, it was not as powerful as Pashto because its native speakers have not been kings in Afghanistan. And except Pashtuns, for all the other tribes in our country, Dari was the lingua franca. According to my own personal observation, one problem that Dari speakers have had is that they have not had the feeling of ownership of the country. Whatever decisions have been taken, they have been subject to accepting that. And that is it. The official language problem. Afghanistan has had this problem for a long time. Although Pashto has been the language of the majority of the population of Afghanistan, it was not the official language of the country for long because there were not enough educated people in Pashto, there were not enough teachers to teach in Pashto, and literacy in Pashto was very low. Then in 20th century, all the policies that were adapted to make Pashto the national language was because they wanted to give the people living in Afghanistan a national identity, one identity, and to bring about the national unity of this nation. However, these decisions to make Pashto the national language was challenged by several factors, such as opposition of the speakers of Uzbeki and other tribes, because although they had one language and they were speaking Farsi, they couldn't get education in a third language, which was difficult for them. Also, there was lack, as I said earlier, the lack of Pashto teachers was another factor in undermining this decision of making Pashto an official and national language in the past. In 1946, there was controversy regarding whether making Pashto the decision to make it the official and national language and make it the language of instruction right or wrong. It was again challenged by several people until Hashim Khan, a prime minister during Zahir Shah, he resigned from his post, and his successors, they went back on the decision. They changed the decision because they thought that there should have been the language and the medium of instructions at schools. Then in 1964, in the Constitution of 1964, during Zahir Shah's time, then it was decided that there be bilingualism, having two languages, Pashto and Dari, both as official languages of the country. Language has always been at the core of politics in Afghanistan. After Dawood's reign, there was conflict between different parties. For example, there were Pashtun reigning parties, which were Khalq and Afghan Milat and the others, who were very influential and powerful, and then there were other Dari-speaking political parties who opposed them, who were like Sholay Jadid and Sittami Milli. And during Khalq and Parcham rivalry, after Khalq and Parcham rivalry, in Najib's constitution, something was added to promote literacy, unity, and culture through both languages. In that constitution, Dari and Pashto were the two official languages of Afghanistan, and the third official language in any place that any other third language was spoken, that was the official language of that area. Then during the Islamic Republic of Rabbani, there was nothing about languages. There was civil war, and there was no administrative capacity to deal with language issues because there was civil war, and they did not have any time to form a constitution or to deal with the issue of languages. Then, during Taliban's first reign, Pashto resurged as a very powerful and dominant language. Although they did not order anything, there was no decree, there was no constitution to say that Pashto is the official or national language of Afghanistan. Their power and their dominance made Pashto the dominant language of all the administrations, commerce, and business. Then in the post-Taliban era, the 2004 constitution during Hamid Karzai's reign has stated that there be two official languages, Pashto and Dari. However, later Uzbeki was also added as an official language of the country. To summarize this presentation, there are a lot of language problems in Afghanistan. Both parties, Pashto speakers, Dari speakers, they all claim that they are subject to discrimination. They all claim that they suffer discrimination. And I believe that more research, more understanding between the two groups, and more academic and educational research needs to be done in this regard. That is all, and these are some of the references used in this presentation. If there are no more questions, I will put an end to it. Thank you.